The massive Imperial starship appeared in Earth's solar system on a quiet Tuesday morning. Its golden hull gleamed under the distant sun, stretching 20 kilometers from bow to stern. Inside the United Earth Defense Command Center, Admiral James stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the main screen with calm eyes that had seen too many wars. "They're broadcasting on all frequencies, sir," reported Lieutenant Tom from his console. "The message is being automatically translated." The Admiral nodded, his gray hair catching the blue light from the displays. Around him, the command center hummed with quiet efficiency as Earth's best military minds prepared for what might come next. "Put them through," he ordered. The screen flickered, revealing a tall figure in ornate purple robes. The Imperial Ambassador Gray stood with the practiced pose of someone used to being obeyed. His humanoid features were sharp, his skin a pale blue that seemed to shimmer under the lights of his ship. "People of Earth," Ambassador Gray spoke in perfectly translated English, "the Galactic Empire welcomes you into its embrace. Your world has been chosen for integration into our perfect society. Resist not, for all who join us prosper." Admiral James allowed himself a small smile. Behind him, hidden from the Imperial view, dozens of defense satellites were already moving into position. Earth's underground missile silos quietly opened their armored doors, and in secret bases around the world, experimental weapons powered up. "Ambassador," James replied politely, "Earth welcomes peaceful contact with your empire. However, we must decline immediate integration. We propose peaceful negotiations to." "Decline?" Gray's expression showed genuine surprise. Young species often misunderstand. This is not an offer, but a notification. The Empire does not negotiate with primitive worlds. Your technology level indicates you achieved spaceflight less than 3 centuries ago. The Empire has ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. The Admiral's smile didn't waver. "Ambassador, let me be clear. Earth wishes to avoid conflict. We would be happy to establish diplomatic relations, trade agreements, and cultural exchange. But we will not surrender our sovereignty." Gray laughed, the sound artificial through the translation system. "Conflict. There has been no conflict in Imperial expansion for 5,000 years. All wise species understand the futility of resistance. Our fleets are invincible, our technology supreme. You have barely reached your neighboring planets." In the background, Lieutenant Tom quietly signaled that Earth's defensive grid was fully activated. Stealth ships moved into shadow positions near Jupiter and Saturn, hidden from Imperial sensors. The planet's quantum communication network hummed with encrypted messages as humanity prepared for what they hoped wouldn't come. "Then let me give you a warning, Ambassador," James said softly. "One that no species has given you before." He stepped closer to the screen, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "Run." Gray's face showed confusion. "Run." "Yes. Turn your ships around and run. Because if you force this conflict, you will learn something that no other species has had to teach you." The Admiral's eyes hardened. "You will learn why humanity's path to the stars was so slow. Why we spent centuries fighting each other instead of reaching for space. You will learn what we can do when we have no choice but to fight." These are the words of a primitive mind that doesn't. "We're not primitive, Ambassador. We're scared. Every advancement we've made, every technology we've developed, came from necessity, from conflict, from survival. Your empire has known peace for so long you've forgotten the cost of war. We haven't. We never will." The ambassador's face darkened. "You dare threaten the empire?" "No." James shook his head. "I'm trying to save it. You have 1 hour to begin withdrawal. After that." He let the sentence hang. The transmission cut off abruptly. In the silence that followed, Lieutenant Tom spoke quietly. "Do you think they'll listen, sir?" Admiral James turned away from the screen, walking toward the command center's tactical display. "No, Tom. They won't. They can't. They don't understand what they're about to face." He touched a control, bringing up Earth's defense grid. "And that's exactly why I warned them to run. Around Earth, humanity's weapons tracked the Imperial ships silently. The calm before the storm had begun, and humanity knew exactly what was coming. They had, after all, been preparing for it their entire history. The Imperial attack began exactly as their military manuals dictated. 500 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their golden hulls forming an arrow pointed at Earth's heart. To Ambassador Gray, watching from the command ship, it was a scene he had witnessed 100 times before. No primitive world had ever survived the first wave. "Begin standard conquest pattern," he ordered, his voice bored. "Disable their primitive satellites first, then." The space around Earth exploded, not with the destructive force of Imperial weapons, but with thousands of tiny, invisible drones that Earth had scattered throughout their orbital paths, each one carrying the simple but devastating weapon: clouds of nearly invisible metal particles, moving at incredible speeds. "Minor damage to front shields," an Imperial officer reported dismissively. Then his voice changed. "Major damage to all forward shields. Multiple hull breaches across the fleet. This is impossible." Gray watched in horror as the beautiful formation began to break apart. The particles were everywhere, cutting through Imperial shields that had been designed to stop energy weapons, not primitive physical projectiles. "Launch fighters," he commanded. "Clear these annoyances from space." 10,000 Imperial fighters poured from the warships, their pilots confident in their superior technology. They flew straight into clouds of automated Earth drones, each one programmed with combat techniques learned from centuries of aerial warfare. "How are they predicting our movements?" A squad leader's panicked voice came through. "These patterns make no sense. They're not following any known combat doctrine." In the Earth Defense Command Center, Admiral James watched the battle unfold. "Send in the ghost ships now," he ordered quietly. From hiding spots throughout the solar system, Earth's stealth vessels emerged. They were ugly, practical things, built for survival rather than show. Their hulls were dark and angular, designed to absorb or deflect scanning beams. While the Empire had spent millennia perfecting their energy weapons, humanity had worked on something far more basic: how to hide, how to strike from shadows, and how to survive. "Impossible," Gray shouted as Earth ships seemed to appear from nowhere, striking at the Imperial fleet's exposed flanks. "Their technology level cannot support stealth systems." "Sir," his tactical officer spoke with a shaking voice, "they're not using energy cloaking. They're using physical geometry and radiation-absorbing materials. Our scanners were designed to detect power signatures, not this." The Imperial formation, perfect for thousands of years, shattered completely. Their ships, arranged for maximum firing arcs against enemies that would fight honorably from the front, found themselves surrounded by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. "Fall back," Gray ordered. "Regroup at the primary coordinates." But the humans had studied their enemies well. As the Imperial ships tried to retreat to their designated rally point, they found the area filled with simple nuclear mines. Not the elegant fusion weapons of the Empire, but crude fission devices that filled space with radiation and debris, blocking their sensors and damaging their delicate systems. "How can they be so advanced and so primitive at the same time?" Gray demanded, watching another display go dark as radiation interfered with its circuits. In the Defense Command Center, Lieutenant Tom looked at the tactical display with a mix of awe and sadness. "They really didn't know what they were getting into, did they, sir?" Admiral James shook his head. "How could they? They'd spent 10,000 years fighting enemies who played by their rules, who tried to match their technology level, their tactics." He gestured at the screen where Imperial ships were frantically trying to regroup. "They never fought an enemy who spent their entire history fighting themselves, who learned warfare not through glorious battles between equals, but through desperate struggles for survival. 30% of the Imperial fleet has withdrawn from the system," an officer reported. "The rest are in disarray." James nodded slowly. "Send the message again. The same one as before. Just one word. Across every frequency the Empire could receive, Earth broadcast its message to the scattered golden ships. Run. This time, they listened. The remaining Imperial ships vanished into hyperspace, leaving behind a debris field of destroyed fighters and damaged warships. Earth had won its first interstellar battle. But Admiral James didn't smile. He knew this was just the beginning. The Empire would be back, and next time they would be ready. But so would humanity. They always were. 3 days after Earth's first victory, Admiral James stood before the United Earth Defense Council. The room was filled with military leaders from every nation, their faces showing both pride and concern. On the main screen, images from captured Imperial databases scrolled past, showing the true size of humanity's enemy. The Empire controls 10,000 worlds, James explained, pointing to a galactic map. But that's also their weakness. They've grown too big, too set in their ways. And now we're going to use that against them. How do you fight an empire that size? Asked General Smith, her weathered face reflecting the room's blue lights. They could lose 1 million ships and still have more. James smiled. The same way ancient tribes took down empires. The same way guerrilla fighters defeated larger armies. We adapt. We strike where they're weak. And most importantly, we don't fight the way they expect us to fight. On another screen, Lieutenant Tom showed footage from the first battle. The Empire's ships are more advanced than ours in every way, except one. They're designed to fight enemies just like themselves. The room watched as human stealth ships struck from impossible angles, as simple kinetic weapons tore through shields designed to stop energy beams, as Imperial formations broke against tactics they'd never seen before. Their technology evolved to fight symmetric warfare. James continued. Their ships are built to battle other ships just like them. But humanity. He paused, looking at each person in the room. We developed our technology through asymmetric warfare, through world wars, through guerrilla conflicts, through terrorism and counter-terrorism. Every weapon we built had to work against enemies both stronger and weaker than ourselves. The next images showed Earth's new weapons, simple missiles that split into thousands of tiny fragments, drones that could play dead and then activate behind enemy lines, ships designed to look damaged and weak, hiding their true strength. We're going to teach them about asymmetric warfare, James said firmly. Starting today. The plan was already in motion. Across the solar system, Earth's ships were being modified. Their hulls were being painted with light-absorbing materials. Their weapons were being redesigned to fire simple projectiles at devastating speeds. Everything elegant was being stripped away, replaced with brutal efficiency. In orbit, automated factories began producing millions of tiny drones. Not the elegant machines the Empire used, but simple, disposable units that could sacrifice themselves to complete their mission. Just as Earth's soldiers had done throughout history. The Empire's ships follow strict patrol routes, Tom explained, showing the data they'd gathered. They maintain perfect formation at all times. Their supply lines are fixed. Their responses are predictable. Because they've never needed to be unpredictable, James added, until now. The first strike came at midnight Earth time. A small Imperial patrol near Jupiter's orbit detected what seemed to be a damaged human cargo ship. They moved to capture it, following standard Imperial protocol for dealing with primitive vessels. The cargo ship exploded into a cloud of microscopic robots that attached to the Imperial ship's hulls, cutting through their armor with primitive but effective tools. By the time the patrol called for help, half their ships were dead in space. This is barbaric, the Imperial captain transmitted. This is not how warfare is conducted. No, James replied over the comm channel. This is how survival is conducted. The second strike hit an Imperial communications hub 2 light-years from Earth. But this time, there was no battle at all. Human ships simply jumped in, used conventional nuclear weapons to fill the area with radiation and debris, and jumped out. The entire hub had to be abandoned, its sensitive equipment ruined by primitive atomic fallout. In the council room, James watched the reports coming in. "The Empire has forgotten something crucial," he said quietly. "Something humanity learned through countless wars. There's no such thing as fair fights. There's no such thing as proper warfare. There's only survival." General Smith nodded slowly. "And we're very, very good at surviving." "Yes," James agreed, watching as another Imperial patrol fell to human guerrilla tactics. "We are. And they're about to learn just how good." Across space, humanity's asymmetric warfare spread like a virus through the Empire's perfect order. Every victory using their unconventional tactics taught them more about their enemy, and every lesson made them more dangerous. The Empire was about to learn why humans had warned them to run. They were about to learn what happened when you forced a species forged in warfare to fight for its survival. In the Imperial Palace on Capital World, the High Command gathered for an emergency meeting. The giant holographic display showed their losses over the past month: 300 ships destroyed, 20 supply bases disabled, and 15 communication hubs rendered useless. Ambassador Gray stood before his superiors, his once confident posture now nervous. "How?" demanded the Imperial commander, his golden armor gleaming. "How is a primitive species doing this to us?" Gray played the latest battle footage. It showed an Imperial battle group approaching Earth's outer defense line. The humans appeared to retreat in disorder, their ships scattered and seemingly damaged. The Imperial ships followed standard pursuit protocol, breaking formation to chase the easier targets. That's when everything went wrong. The damaged human ships suddenly turned, revealing hidden weapons. The scattered retreat transformed into a coordinated trap. From the debris fields of previous battles, powered-down human drones sprang to life, attacking from all directions. "They're using our own tactics against us," Gray explained. "They study how we respond, then use those responses to trap us. They've even started copying our technology, but they're using it in ways we never considered." The footage showed human ships using stolen Imperial shield technology. But instead of creating defensive barriers, they were generating small shields inside Imperial ships' engine rooms, destroying them from the inside. "Barbarians," the commander spat. "This is not how war is fought." "No, sir," Gray agreed. "This is how survival is fought, and they're better at it than we are." Meanwhile, on the edges of Imperial space, Admiral James directed Earth's next strike. The command center was no longer in one place. They'd learned from history about the danger of central command posts. Instead, it was spread across multiple hidden locations, connected by quantum communications that the Empire couldn't intercept. "Status report," James ordered. Lieutenant Tom's hologram appeared. He was commanding a strike force from a hidden base near Alpha Centauri. "Phase 3 complete, sir. The Empire's supply lines are cut in 3 more sectors. Their ships are having to travel twice as far for fuel and repairs." Their response: "Exactly what we expected. They're sending massive fleet groups to guard their supply lines, just like they've done for 10,000 years." James nodded. "And our raiders, hitting the now undefended worlds those fleets left behind. The Empire can't adapt fast enough. Every time they strengthen one area, we hit another," James finished. "Because they still don't understand. They think warfare is about strength meeting strength. They never learned what every guerrilla fighter knows. Warfare is about finding weakness." The tactical display showed the bigger picture. The mighty Empire was struggling to deal with an enemy that refused to fight according to the rules. Their rigid command structure, once a strength, had become a weakness. Every decision had to go through proper channels, following proper protocols. But human commanders had authority to make decisions on the spot, to adapt, to change plans, to seize opportunities, just as their ancestors had done in countless wars throughout history. New Imperial transmission intercepted. An officer reported, "They're calling us the ghost enemy now. Their ships are starting to hesitate when they detect human vessels. Fear, James said quietly. Another weapon they don't understand. Their soldiers have never felt it before. They've never had to face an enemy they couldn't understand or predict. The displays showed more Imperial ships changing course to avoid possible human ambush points. Their once perfect formations were becoming hesitant, uncertain. The unbeatable Imperial war machine was learning something its enemies had known for millennia: the fear of fighting humans. "Sir," Tom reported, "our deep space probes are detecting massive fleet movements. The Empire is pulling forces from their frontier worlds. They're gathering for something big." James studied the data, his expression grim. "Yes, they're finally doing what we expected. If you can't beat an enemy with skill or technology, you try to overwhelm them with numbers," Tom finished. "Prepare all forces," James ordered. "The real test is coming. The Empire is about to learn their final lesson about human warfare." "What's that, sir?" "That we're at our most dangerous when we're cornered. Humanity has never fought harder than when defeat meant extinction." Across human space, ships and crews prepared for the Empire's desperate gamble. The tables had turned, but the greatest battle was yet to come. The great hall of the Imperial Palace had never seen such chaos. Representatives from 50 different Imperial worlds stood shouting at each other while the Emperor watched from his golden throne. The massive chamber's perfect acoustics, designed to carry the Emperor's voice to his subjects, now amplified their anger. "3 of my worlds have lost their defense fleets," shouted one governor, his purple robes shaking. "The humans don't destroy our ships. They disable them and steal our technology." "The trade routes are unsafe," called another. "The humans appear from nowhere, strike our supply ships, and vanish again. My people are starting to go hungry." Ambassador Gray stood to the side, watching the disorder spread through the Empire's perfect order. On screens around the hall, reports showed the growing crisis. Imperial ships were refusing to patrol certain sectors. Crews were requesting transfers away from the human border. Some colonies were even talking about independence. The Emperor raised his hand for silence. "We have gathered the largest fleet in Imperial history. 10,000 ships will crush these humans and restore order." "And if they fail?" a voice asked quietly. The hall fell silent as Admiral James's hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. The human leader stood calmly, hands behind his back, his image transmitted through communication systems the Empire thought were secure. "How dare you?" the Emperor began. "I come with another warning," James interrupted, "and an offer. We've captured enough of your ships to understand your technology. We've learned enough about your empire to understand its weaknesses. But we don't want to destroy you. You cannot destroy us," the Emperor declared. "We are eternal." "No," James shook his head. "You're stagnant. Your empire stopped growing long ago. It just kept getting bigger. We've seen your records. Your people don't innovate anymore. They don't create. They just follow the old ways." On screens around the hall, images began to play. They showed human ships using Imperial technology in new ways. Imperial weapons modified to work better. Even Imperial shields improved by human engineers. "In 3 months," James continued, "we've advanced your technology more than you have in 1,000 years. Because we had to. Because that's what humans do when we're threatened. We adapt. We improve. We survive." The governor of a border world stepped forward. "What is your offer?" "The same one we made at the beginning. Peace, trade, exchange of ideas. But as equals, not subjects. We can help your empire grow again. Really grow, not just expand." The Emperor stood, his face dark with rage. "Enough. I will not let these primitives poison my people's minds. The fleet launches tomorrow. We will burn their worlds to ash." "Then you leave us no choice," James said sadly. "We didn't want to do this, but you need to understand what you're really facing." New images appeared, human ships approaching undefended Imperial worlds. But they weren't attacking. They were broadcasting messages, showing Imperial citizens how humans lived, how they chose their leaders, how they were free to question, to change, to grow. "Your people are already talking to us," James explained. "They're learning that there are other ways to live. Your rigid control is breaking down, and you can't stop it. Ideas are harder to fight than ships." Shouts erupted again in the hall. Some demanded immediate attack. Others called for negotiations. The perfect unity of the Empire was shattering. "You have 6 hours," James said firmly. "Withdraw your fleet and open diplomatic channels, or we'll continue. Not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous. The truth about how much stronger your empire could be if it were free." The hologram vanished, leaving chaos in its wake. The Emperor shouted for order, but for the first time in 10,000 years, his words were met with argument instead of obedience. In Earth's command center, Lieutenant Tom looked at Admiral James. "Will they listen this time?" "Some will," James replied, watching the feeds from the Imperial Palace. "Some won't, and that's exactly what we need. Because the only thing that can really change the Empire is the Empire itself," Tom finished. The revolution had begun. Not with weapons, but with something far more powerful: hope for a better way. 3 Imperial warships dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's defense perimeter. But instead of attacking, they broadcast a simple message: "We request asylum." Admiral James stood in the command center, watching as more ships followed. Not just military vessels, but civilian ships too. They came in 1s and 2s at first, then in groups of dozens, each carrying the same message: they wanted freedom. 6th Fleet Group requesting permission to defect. Lieutenant Tom reported, his voice tired but satisfied. "That's the 3rd Fleet today." James nodded, studying the tactical displays. The Empire was splitting apart faster than anyone had expected. "How many worlds have declared independence now?" 800 and counting, sir. They're calling themselves the Free Worlds Alliance." On the main screen, footage showed peaceful protests spreading across Imperial worlds. Citizens were demanding the right to elect their leaders, just as humans did. Imperial guards stood down rather than fire on their own people. The revolution wasn't being fought with weapons, but with ideas. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor watched his perfect society crumble. "How?" he demanded of Ambassador Gray. "How did they defeat us without destroying us?" Gray, who had spent months studying human history, answered quietly, "Because they understand something we forgot, Your Majesty. Change doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the people up." "Launch the fleet," the Emperor commanded. "Crush these rebels." "The fleet won't launch," Gray replied. "The crews, they're refusing orders. They've seen how humans trust their soldiers to think for themselves, to make decisions. Our crews want the same respect." Across Imperial space, the change was spreading like wildfire. Worlds that had been under strict control for thousands of years were waking up. They saw how humans lived: messy, chaotic, but free to grow and change. They wanted that chance. In Earth's command center, a new message appeared. It came from the Imperial Military Academy itself. The next generation of Imperial officers had seized control of the facility. They didn't want to be blindly obedient commanders anymore. They wanted to be leaders. "How many ships do we have helping with the evacuations?" James asked. 2,000 Earth vessels and about 5,000 defected Imperial ships, Tom replied. "We're moving civilians away from zones where loyalist forces are still fighting." The revolution wasn't completely peaceful. Some Imperial commanders remained faithful to the old ways, but they found themselves fighting enemies who used human tactics now. Their perfect formations were broken by surprise attacks. Their rigid strategies failed against forces that could adapt and think independently. "Message from the Imperial Senate," an officer reported. "They've called for an emergency vote. The Emperor, he's being removed from power." James watched the news spread across the galaxy. The Empire wasn't being destroyed. It was being reborn, transformed by the very force it had dismissed as primitive. human ideas about freedom and self-determination. "Sir," Tom said suddenly, "new transmission from Capital World. The Imperial Guard has stepped down. The Senate, they're requesting Earth send representatives to help them write a new constitution." A small smile crossed James's face. This was what they had hoped for, what they had planned. Not to destroy the Empire, but to help it grow into something better. "Incoming message from the Free Worlds Alliance," another officer called out. "They're asking for human advisors. They want to learn about something called democracy." In the corner of the command center, a group of Imperial defectors watched Earth's news broadcasts with fascination. They saw humans arguing about policies, voting for leaders, freely expressing different opinions. Things that would have been crimes in the Empire were just normal life on Earth. "Send the response," James ordered. "Tell them we're ready to help. But make it clear, we're not their new rulers. We're just here to show them how to rule themselves." The revolution had succeeded, not through superior firepower, but through superior ideas. The Empire hadn't been conquered by Earth's weapons. It had been transformed by humanity's greatest strength, the power to adapt, to change, and to grow. 1 year after the first Imperial ship requested asylum, the new Galactic Council held its opening session. The great hall that once housed only the Emperor's voice now rang with hundreds of different opinions. Representatives from Earth sat alongside delegates from former Imperial worlds, all equal, all free to speak. Admiral James watched from his seat as Ambassador Gray, now the leader of the reform movement, addressed the council. The former Imperial diplomat looked different now, his ornate robes replaced by simpler clothing, his posture more relaxed. 1 year ago, Gray began, "We thought we were the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We had the strongest ships, the most advanced technology, and 10,000 years of unbroken rule." He paused, looking around the chamber. "We were wrong." The screens around the hall showed images from the past year. Imperial citizens learning to vote for the first time. Former Imperial officers studying Earth's military history, learning about flexible command structures and adaptive tactics. Scientists from 100 worlds working together, combining Imperial technology with human innovation. "The humans didn't defeat us," Gray continued. "They taught us. When they warned us to run, it wasn't a threat. It was genuine concern. They knew what would happen when an empire that had forgotten how to change met a species that had never stopped changing." In the audience, Lieutenant Tom sat next to a young Imperial officer named Reed. Once enemies, they were now part of a joint Earth-Imperial training program, teaching the next generation of leaders to combine the best of both civilizations. "Your people adapt so quickly," Reed whispered to Tom. "In 1 year, we've made more progress than in the last 1,000. How do you do it?" Tom smiled. "Because we never stopped practicing. Earth's history isn't just about war. It's about change. Empires rising and falling. Old ways being replaced by new ones. We learned that standing still means falling behind." On the council floor, James stood to speak. The hall fell silent. Earth's defenders had earned profound respect over the past year, not through conquest, but through their willingness to help their former enemies grow. "A year ago, we faced each other as enemies," James began. "Today, we sit together as partners. The Empire didn't fall, it evolved. And that's humanity's greatest lesson. The ability to evolve isn't weakness. It's the greatest strength any civilization can have." The chamber erupted in applause. Even the few remaining Imperial traditionalists couldn't deny the progress. Trade between worlds had doubled. Scientific advances that once took centuries now happened in months. The rigid hierarchy that had slowed everything down was replaced by cooperation and innovation. "There will be challenges ahead," James continued. "Change isn't always easy, but we face them together now. Not as rulers and subjects, but as equals, each bringing our own strengths to make something greater than either of us could be alone." After the session, James stood in the palace gardens with Gray, watching transport ships come and go from the spaceport. The sleek Imperial vessels now flew alongside Earth's more practical ships, each learning from the other's design. "I have to ask," Gray said quietly, "that first warning you gave us, to run, did you know it would end like this?" James smiled. "We hoped. Earth's history taught us something important. Real victory isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about making them into allies, about helping them grow into something better. And if we hadn't listened, if we had kept fighting, then we would have fought, and we would have won." James turned to face his former enemy. "But this victory, the one where we all grow together, this is better. This is what humanity has always wanted, not to be the strongest, but to help everyone become stronger." As the twin suns set over Capital World, their light fell on a changed galaxy. The Empire hadn't been destroyed. It had been transformed. And in that transformation, both humanity and their former enemies had found something greater than victory. They had found hope for a future that was better than either of them could have built alone.